Have I already lost 1.5 minutes? What's happened? I don't need a clicker. The only reason I need a seat is I find it hard to talk without my hands, and so I needed to put my phone on my lap, knowing that I was going to hold a microphone. Kia ora koutou katoa, thank you for that introduction. I am not really going to talk about what I'm doing or much about what I've done. I'm actually just going to go through the milestones, because I took the subject quite literally, and share not just what they are, but what I felt and why some of them were surprising. And the purpose of doing that is hopefully you'll find it useful, but if you're going through a similar kind of journey, taking a moment to pause and reflect on the milestones that are important to you. So Figure.NZ, the first milestone that is just totally stuck in my mind was when I first wrote a name badge and went to an event and it said Lillian Grace, Figure.NZ. And it is hard to describe how significant that was, because when you have an idea in your head and then you try and turn it into something, the first time you write it down in a way that other people are going to see is really special. And as I was filling in the online form, I wrote my name, wrote my title, CEO, Figure.NZ, and I was like, can I just do that? Can I claim I'm a CEO when this organisation doesn't exist? And kind of deleted it and wrote it in again. And it was actually really significant and important. And I will never forget that. There were others, I remember, and I'm just trying to kind of pull out the ones that are a bit more unusual, not some of the more normal ones. One of the milestones was when I could first afford to buy a laptop for one of the people that worked for me. And it was such a big deal for me, because especially running a charity and a small organisation, that was like a really big deal to buy a brand new computer. And the person I brought it for didn't really realise, because of course you expect your employer to buy you one anyway. But for us it was a really big thing. So that was that's another moment that really sticks out for me. Things like getting our first office or getting our first award or getting our first contract were all things that I have an enormous amount of emotion still wrapped around. Like, I can remember where I was, I can remember what I was wearing. I remember putting out a request for funding. I wanted to get donations of up to $30,000, like getting lots of people to contribute to help Figure.NZ go from nothing to something. And I got an email from someone, from Rowan Simpson, who was one of the founders of Trade Me. And he said, I've just read your document and I can't think why I wouldn't give all of it to you. And I just remember just standing up and crying. I can remember it so clearly, like those moments that take you from nothing to something, and that how significant they kind of are. I remember the first time that someone from my team did a talk and it wasn't me. Someone else, had come on board and knew enough, was able to stand up and represent the organisation that had started within my head. And that was, that the specialness of that is hard to convey, because often as a founder you are out all the time, on the road, everyone knows you. And when somebody else is requested or can stand up and do it, that's like a really significant kind of milestone. The first team baby was also, like, when someone in our team had a baby, was a really, felt like becoming an auntie or a grandparent or something. It was a pretty special kind of moment. And the another one that I remember is when the first thing came out the door that wasn't my idea, that was a really awesome idea that somebody else had thought of. And that, again, when you're a founder and at the start everything is your idea because you've been holding it in your head and other people are helping you execute it amazingly. But when something goes out and you're like, oh, that wasn't me, it is so beautiful. Like, it's deeply, deeply satisfying. I found it so. And so for me, and with Figure.NZ, the most satisfying milestone, without a doubt, was realising that it didn't need me anymore. and that I had built it into something that wouldn't need me. And so it was the end of July last year where I handed it over to Ngā Peta Riley, who's now the CEO. And I took that and I said, I'm not going to, I'd been in the Slack channel for years. That was how our whole organisation ran. And I just went immediately out of it and stepped back from everything, have been like in a little cave working on my next thing. And watching it fly without me has, it's interesting because some people say to me, oh, do you get any feelings of like jealousy or like you want it to need you? And I kind of liken it to when your children leave home, you don't actually want them to need you. Like you want to know that you have set them up to fly without you, and you want them to still kind of remember you a little bit, come back and visit, but you don't want them to rely on you. And I had set Figurines Edge up from the start, proactively like pushing people out on stages when like instead of me, and creating things so that they didn't revolve around me. And so it was I feel like it was one of my greatest achievements was creating it so that when I stepped out, it's never had to come back. And that's been like a really special milestone, especially some of the success in the last week with a new version of the Māori data site that Ngā Peta launched this week. And to know that has just been received so well has felt really, really special. With Figure Group, that's a whole other world that I'm not going to talk about tonight, but I could talk about it for days. But what's been the relevance here is that as we do things like get our first branding, get our first contract, making our first name badge again, and all of those things, seeing, I don't know if I'm still up there, seeing co-founder next to my name instead of founder for something for the first time, like those things, like I'm capturing all of those memories. And for me, I've got kind of 3 really important things to note about Milestones. It was actually nice to have a reason to reflect on Milestones for this kōrero. And the first is Milestones will keep coming. They aren't just one big, like, be a unicorn, go and do a thing. They're really special, and you want them to be like to have many of them, and so actually enjoy them and kind of recognise them for the milestone that they are. Like it's like you buy a first laptop, like that's a big deal when you've started with nothing. And what I have found really important is to get people around me for different milestones that understand that milestone and help me navigate it. So for example, when I hired my first employee, I was completely terrified. When I hired employee 2, 3 to 10, it was totally fine, but I needed people at that time who were also hiring their first employee and shared the fear, like the total terror that you feel when you realise someone's livelihood depends on your decisions. And the third thing, and the most important thing for me perhaps about milestones, is to celebrate them, to actually stop and celebrate. And we all have different ways of doing that, and for me it is absolutely with champagne. And and we extend that, and that's not everyone's like cup of tea or a glass of champagne, but we extend that. Like, so the other day when we got our branding finalised, we took a bottle of champagne to the people that had designed it because we were so excited, and they were floored because they're like, oh, you've actually taught us that we should be stopping to celebrate these things. And so for me, that all milestones, they're just going to come for all of time, just keep going. And it's not about like this big one thing that you're holding out for, just, so I think that noting them down helps remember them as well. So that's me. Thank you.